Success isn't about speed, it's about direction. And that's what Stephen R. Covey reminds us in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In a world filled with noise, competition, and endless demands, Covey invites us to slow down, not to stop but to realign. 'Cause effectiveness, real effectiveness, comes from living a life rooted in principles, not just techniques. In a world where so many chase achievement without meaning, Covey gives us a compass. He doesn't promise shortcuts. He teaches discipline. He doesn't talk about charisma. He emphasizes character. He reminds us that leadership, both personal and professional, is not just about being efficient, but about being truly effective. So if you're leading a team, a school, a region, or even a family, know that your habits shape your legacy. Be proactive. Know your mission. Protect your priorities. Uplift others. Listen more. Collaborate with courage. And never stop growing. 'Cause effectiveness is not about having all the answers. It's about living with the right questions. It's not about speed. It's about direction. And when in doubt, remember Covey's timeless wisdom. Live out of your imagination, not your history. Habit 1. Be proactive. Being proactive is about recognizing that we are not victims of circumstance, we are agents of change. In leadership, this means understanding that our response to external pressures defines our credibility and effectiveness. Whether it's a crisis in governance, a conflict among staff, or public criticism, a proactive leader remains centered, calm, and intentional. Covey reminds us that between what happens to us and how we respond lies our greatest power, the power to choose. This habit separates reactive managers who blame, delay, or avoid from proactive leaders who take ownership, respond with integrity, and drive forward with purpose. Proactive leadership also means taking initiative without waiting to be told. Public service, this is critical. A proactive school head doesn't wait for a directive to implement a reading program. A proactive regional director doesn't wait for public demand to innovate a monitoring system. Leaders who practice Habit 1 don't waste time blaming the system, they act within their influence to reshape the system from the inside out. Covey emphasizes that proactive people are value-driven, not feeling-driven. Their behavior is a product of their decisions, not their moods. They choose responsibility over resentment and contribution over complaint. When challenges arise, they ask, "What can I do?" rather than "Who's to blame?" This shift in mindset is transformative, builds resilience in the leader and trust in the team. Ultimately, proactivity is the foundation of all other habits. Without it, nothing else is sustainable. It's the belief that leadership begins not with titles or tools, but with self-mastery. It is the choice to lead oneself before leading others. And in the public sector, where demands are high and resources limited, being proactive means rising each day not as a manager of problems, but as a steward of solutions. Habit 2. Begin with the end in mind. To begin with the end in mind is to live with purpose at the center. It is to visualize your destination before taking a step. In leadership, this means knowing your core mission, your ultimate goal, not just for your organization but for your legacy. Covey challenges us to picture our retirement speech or even our funeral. What would we want others to say about how we led? Were we respected? Did we inspire? Did we make people feel seen and safe? Habit 2 calls us to lead with clarity, not just activity. This habit is about personal vision and organizational alignment. Leaders often get caught up in reports, tasks, and deadlines, but effectiveness comes from alignment between daily actions and long-term values. A director who begins with the end in mind won't be swayed by every political shift. They will lead with consistency because they've defined their purpose. They've built a personal mission statement that governs every decision. When applied institutionally, this habit helps shape culture. Agencies that begin with the end in mind don't settle for compliance, they pursue excellence. A school leader may envision not just test scores but holistic learners. A health program director may focus not only on statistics but on community wellness. The end becomes a filter for every decision. Is this moving us closer to what truly matters? Most of all, this habit teaches intentionality. In a world full of distractions and emergencies, it reminds leaders to pause and ask, what do I want to be remembered for? It's not about control, it's about focus. It's not about rigidity, it's about direction. The most effective leaders don't just respond, they design. They don't just move, they move with meaning. Habit 3, put first things first. Habit 3 turns the vision of Habit 2 into action. It's where self-discipline meets leadership. Put first things first is about organizing our lives around our highest priorities, not the most urgent ones, but the most important ones. Covey introduces the time management matrix, showing how too many leaders live in Quadrant I, crisis mode, reacting to problems rather than preventing them. Effective leaders shift toward Quadrant 2, planning, nurturing relationships, and building systems that prevent fires before they start. Putting first things first requires saying no even when it's difficult. It means protecting space for what truly matters, people, purpose, and progress. For a school head, it might mean carving time for teacher mentoring over attending endless compliance meetings. For a regional director, it may mean focusing on long-term quality assurance rather than obsessing over this week's report. It's about leading with intention rather than living in reaction. This habit also demands courage. Sometimes the first thing is not the easiest thing. It may be having a difficult conversation, investing in team development, or confronting a broken process. Covey writes that leaders must have the independent will to align their time with their values. They must resist the tyranny of the urgent and focus instead on what will produce lasting impact. Putting first things first is ultimately an act of integrity. It says, I will honor my vision by making it visible in my calendar. I will honor my team by investing in their growth, not just their output. And I will lead not by default but by design. For leaders in the public sector, this habit is a daily commitment to clarity over chaos and purpose over pressure. Habit 4, think win-win. In public service, collaboration is essential, but competition is often the culture. Habit 4 challenges this. Think win-win is not a feel-good slogan, it's a mindset of mutual respect and shared success. Covey describes win-win as the belief that there is enough success for everyone. That you don't have to lose for me to win. This habit transforms leadership from a game of power into a practice of partnership. A win-win leader looks for solutions where all parties feel valued. In a school, this may mean involving teachers in policymaking. In government, it could mean listening to both community feedback and internal constraints before deciding. Covey contrasts win-win with win-lose and lose-win mentalities that breed mistrust, resentment, and disengagement. Win-win leaders prioritize relationships as much as results. But win-win isn't weak. It's not compromise. It requires a strong sense of self and respect for others. It requires emotional maturity, trust building, and courage. Covey writes that win-win is built on 2 pillars, consideration and courage. Without both, the outcome is either too soft or too selfish. Effective leaders learn to speak truth with empathy and lead decisions with fairness. In a system where hierarchy often silences voices, this habit is revolutionary. It shifts authority from being positional to relational. It encourages leaders to grow others, not just direct them. And in doing so, it creates cultures of cooperation, not control. When teams feel trusted, they take ownership. When communities feel heard, they contribute more. Thinking win-win creates the space for real, lasting progress. Habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Leaders are often expected to speak first, decide fast, and act with certainty. But Habit 5 turns that on its head. Seek first to understand, then to be understood is a call to listen, not just to words but to meaning. Covey teaches that most people don't really listen. They filter, judge, and prepare their response. But effective leaders practice empathetic listening, which means listening with the intent to understand, not reply. This habit is a game changer in conflict resolution. When tensions rise in an office or department, the best leaders don't escalate, they empathize. They ask, "Help me understand what's important to you," rather than defending their own stance. Covey reminds us that when people feel truly heard, their defensiveness drops. Understanding creates safety, and safety leads to openness. Empathetic listening also deepens relationships. It shows staff, stakeholders, and citizens that their voice matters. For public officials, this habit is especially important during consultations, complaints, or change management. It's not just about policies, it's about people. And people respond not to perfection, but to presence. Only after understanding comes the opportunity to be understood. Covey teaches that credibility grows when people feel seen. Once we've earned trust through listening, our message has weight. Leaders who skip this step may speak with authority, but they fail to inspire. But those who truly listen earn the right to be heard. Habit 6, Synergize. Synergize is habit 6, and it's the habit of creative cooperation. Builds on all the previous habits. When leaders are proactive, purposeful, focused, fair, and empathetic, they create the conditions for synergy. Covey defines synergy as the idea that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. It's not just teamwork, it's transformation. Synergy happens when diversity is celebrated, not managed. When people with different strengths, backgrounds, and ideas come together and trust each other, innovation happens. In government service, this might look like cross-sector collaboration, co-creating policies with grassroots communities, or merging analytics with lived experience. Synergy is the opposite of bureaucracy. It is possibility in action. But synergy requires humility. A leader must be willing to say, "I don't have all the answers." It requires openness to being wrong, to learning, and to discovering new ways of doing things. Covey describes synergy as the fruit of high-trust relationships. Cannot be faked. Cannot be forced. Must be fostered. When teams synergize, they don't just solve problems, they find better problems to solve. They elevate each other's thinking. They build legacy. Habit 6 is the peak of public leadership. It's what happens when structures serve people and people come together not out of obligation but out of shared purpose. Habit 7, Sharpen the saw. The final habit is one of renewal. Sharpen the saw is a call to rest, reflect, and recharge. Covey reminds us that no leader can pour from an empty cup. The first 6 habits are about growth, the 7th is about sustainability. It is about preserving and enhancing the greatest asset you have, yourself. Covey teaches that we must sharpen the saw in 4 areas: physical, health and energy, mental, learning and thinking, emotional/social relationships, and spiritual, meaning and values. Ignoring any of these leads to imbalance and eventually breakdown. A leader may be mentally sharp but emotionally drained, or spiritually strong but physically exhausted. Habit 7 reminds us that true effectiveness is holistic. For third-level officials, this habit is critical. The weight of leadership is real. The demand for results, the pressure of systems, and the expectations of people can erode well-being over time. But renewal is not a luxury, it is a responsibility. Leaders who care for themselves model sustainability for others. They give their team permission to be whole humans, not just performers. Sharpen the saw is about building rhythms of rest into routines of responsibility. It's about reading, walking, praying, laughing, reflecting. It's about returning to why you began this journey. Because in the quiet, the leader hears again the call to serve, not from exhaustion but from strength. So if you're leading a team, a school, a region, or even a family, know that your habits shape your legacy. Be proactive. Know your mission. Protect your priorities. Uplift others. Listen more. Collaborate with courage. And never stop growing. Because effectiveness is not about having all the answers. It's about living with the right questions. It's not about speed. It's about direction. And when in doubt, remember Covey's timeless wisdom. Live out of your imagination, not your history.